Hey everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Cool stuff to talk about today. So we're starting a new unit here. The last unit we talked about how America got its start, basically up to like 1825, a time period called the Era of Good Feelings. Well, we feel like we just beat England for the second time in a war. We clearly lost. Doesn't stop us from thinking that we won the War of 1812. Everybody loves ourselves in America. We're super American. And then we get it in our minds, you know what everybody else needs? More America in their life. And America starts aggressively trying to expand our culture, our land, and our culture onto anybody else that we can in any other areas that we can. And that's what we're going to start talking about today. So this is a famous painting of the time period in the late 1800s. This is the American idea of what is happening. That America starts spreading west. All right, it's a concept called manifest destiny. America is supposed to be this angel spreading just general awesomeness out onto what appears to be savages out here in the middle of the country, these evil buffalo, not that they're evil, but it's like just run them off. Well, we're bringing in modern technology, we're bringing in trains, we're bringing in all this awesome stuff. And yeah, sure, there's entire civilizations of people that are there. Let's get rid of them. And America views that as a positive thing because we're just bringing superior everything to a land that doesn't have it. Today we know America is probably pretty misguided in that, but that's what a lot of this unit's going to start out with, is this concept of manifest destiny. Now, the actual definition for manifest destiny is it's the United States' moral responsibility and obligation to God to expand American land and culture at all cost. And we're really going to focus on the land west of the Appalachian Mountains. All right? So let me kind of break that down for what that means, because it is a very important general concept. This isn't necessarily just the government saying, here's what we're going to do because we'll have more land, more people, make more money, which obviously is a motivating factor for the United States government. But there's also this intrinsic belief in the American public that we as a people, Americans, are better than everybody else, and it is our responsibility to spread that awesomeness. Now, America was founded on Puritans and Pilgrims, very religious people. That freedom of religion is a big reason that people came to the New World to start over. So America has a very religious background and foundation. So not surprisingly, a lot of the motivation for a lot of things America does is religion-based, and manifest destiny is no different. So America basically is populated here in the pink area on the far right here. That's behind me. Let me get out of the way here so that you can see that. That's where America pretty much is, what we're talking about here today in this lesson. We want to take over all the other colors. All right? Now, it's not that America feels it's okay to do this. The belief isn't that we are justified in doing this, even though that is true on both of those accounts. Our motivation is that we as Americans are clearly so much better than everybody else. We were put here by God. And it is our responsibility to God to force ourselves onto any other land or peoples that we can find, because that's what God would want. Now, we're going to make these people we take over and that we basically invade their territory, we're going to make them American. And if they don't want to be American, we'll just shoot them, because that's what God would want. That seems wild, but that is genuinely the belief with this concept of manifest destiny as America aggressively starts spreading west and taking over the areas that is completely inhabited by Native Americans. All right, but manifest destiny will impact a lot of people, but mainly it's going to negatively impact Native American cultures in which America finds no value in. So this is a picture of America on railroad lines. You know, like we have this new modern society the houses are built up. You know, we got cabins, we got towns, we got industry, we got railroads, we got telegraph lines, things that we'll talk about here as well in this unit. All this stuff gets built, and then out in front of you is nothing but wilderness. And America is spreading out that way because it is our responsibility to God to spread ourselves wherever we want. And if another group is there already, either A, they get to be like us, or we run them off and shoot them. Like, there is no in between, all right? So, manifest destiny is America's belief it is our responsibility to God to spread ourselves as far as possible. So the question here is, how can manifest destiny have a negative impact on cultures and people that surrounded America in the 1800s? So while manifest destiny is great for America, how could that not be a good thing for people that surrounded us that are going to be impacted by this? So pause me, answer that completely, and we're moving on. So let's talk about some examples here of manifest destiny. All right. The first example here is going to actually be part of a treaty that we're going to have with Spain. All right. It's called the Adams-Onis Treaty, and it's going to deal with Florida. So Florida, let me get out of the way here. Florida is the striped area here at the bottom of America. America at this point does not own Florida. The reason America doesn't own Florida is it is still owned by Spain. Random story, the reason Spain owns Florida, and they've owned it for hundreds of years at this point in the mid-1800s, is they originally thought there was the Fountain of Youth there. There wasn't. So Spain has just controlled Florida for a long time. Spain did, if you remember, they owned New Orleans. They owned a bunch of stuff over the New World. They lost New Orleans to Napoleon, who then sold it and the rest of the area, the Louisiana Purchase, to America. Mexico's declared their independence, something else Spain owned. So Spain doesn't really have much over here, but they do still own Florida. All right? That makes a big deal when America and Americans start spreading down into Georgia and Alabama and more southern areas, which is just above Florida. Here's a better picture. Here in the pinkish areas at the top, and they are moving down there and setting up colonies. Not colonies, they're just setting up towns and farms. Well, there's an entire Native American population down there that doesn't like that they're being forced off their land. All right? The Native Americans by this point have understood how borders work and understand if they cross this imaginary line into Florida, they're under Spanish jurisdiction. Guess how many people from Spain actually live in Florida? Basically none, all right? Florida's just something that Spain owns. Well, technically, America can't just walk into Florida without permission from Spain. The Indians down there, specifically the Seminole Indians, know about this. So when these settlers set up shop in Alabama and Georgia, the Native Americans, specifically the Seminoles, will run across the border here from Florida, attack the settlers, and kill them because they obviously don't want them down there taking their land. And then they run back into Florida, knowing the Americans legally cannot chase them back into Florida and do anything about it. This makes America very angry because the Americans are getting attacked by Native Americans, and Americans can't go do what they typically do when Native Americans make them mad, which is just kill them. So the United States contacts Spain and says, Spain, you have an Indian problem here in your area, please deal with it. And Spain's like, we'll get to it eventually. Well, Spain doesn't ever really get to it eventually because Spain doesn't really care about Florida. They don't really have anything down in Florida that they want. Clearly the old Fountain of Youth is a myth, and they figured this out now, so they're like, I don't know what we're going to do. And America says, why don't you give us Florida then? We'll buy it from you for next to nothing. And Spain's like, all right. And that's what the Adams-Onis Treaty is where Spain sells America Florida. That is how America got Florida. Why do you think America wanted Florida? Purely to go in and kill the Native Americans there that were causing a problem. And it's called the Seminole Wars. And America, with manifest destiny to spread our culture, one of the first things we do is we take over Florida in the Adams-Onis Treaty so we can kill the Indians and then spread down further into Florida. Florida is not a very forgiving habitat in the 1800s. A lot of things like alligators and swamps, and there's all types of things in Florida that made it was, even though we got it and we wanted to spread our culture down there, it's going to take a while for the Florida population to really skyrocket in the 1800s. So the Adams-Onis Treaty, we got Florida. The next thing that we're going to do, and we had mentioned this in the previous unit, when we got the Louisiana Purchase, there's all this empty land. One of the very first things that we did was Thomas Jefferson did it, sent Lewis and Clark, these two explorers and a group of people with Sacagawea, their translator, and a whole bunch of other people that went with them, to map out this new territory. They were able to walk all the way to the Pacific Ocean and all the way back, and they created a map for it. So now there is this encouragement, if anybody that wants to move out and start over, you can take this trail that has been perfectly mapped out by Lewis and Clark all the way to Oregon if you want, and it's called the Oregon Trail. The Oregon Trail is very much going to help America's concept of manifest destiny. As we spread west, there is a mapped out route that you can take, and you know how to get over the mountains, how to navigate these places, and so the Oregon Trail, the route that Lewis and Clark mapped, will eventually be called the Oregon Trail, and people will take that, move out west, and to start over. They don't necessarily always make it to Oregon. You can see all these different cities here that spring up. They only get halfway and they're like, I'm tired, I'll just live here. But the question here is, explain how the Oregon Trail and the Adams-Onis Treaty both are symbolic of the American idea of manifest destiny. So to simplify that, how does the Oregon Trail and the Adams-Onis Treaty both help America expand at this time? So we talked about that. Pause me, answer that completely. Moving on. All right. So we've been talking about growing as a country, trying to spread out, manifest destiny. Let's talk about another growth. See that segue there? Yeah, that's awesome. How about the growth of our national economy? So Thomas Jefferson, he wanted a very small agricultural economy. All right, this is one of the big reasons Thomas Jefferson wanted a small government. He didn't want us to go be super industrial or anything. Some of the stuff that's happening in Europe, he wanted us to be small, family focused, just farming, not be advanced at all. That was his goal for America. America is going to do the complete opposite of that. America is going to, by the early 1800s, about the time Thomas Jefferson gets out of office, honestly, about 1820, is going to embrace this concept that is sweeping Europe at the time. It's the Industrial Revolution. So life had not changed a whole lot for humans over the last couple thousand years. Sure, we had better inventions here and there. Medicine had gotten a little better. The embracing science has gotten better. But there's no air conditioning. There's no, unless you hear somebody play music live, there's no music. There's no, electricity. There's no microwaves. There's no ovens. Things really aren't that different in the 1800s compared to when Jesus was alive, as a point of reference. So that's about to change. The Industrial Revolution really changes human existence across the board, and America wants in on it. The Industrial Revolution is just, why this happens in the 1800s and it doesn't happen 1,000 years before. It's not like we, got new resources to do this. That's a complicated question, but what we do know is it does start happening in the 1800s. People start mass producing stuff, and this desire for, we want the next new thing, is going to really come out starting in the 1800s with this concept of the Industrial Revolution. The first big machine that's going to come out that is going to make this possible is a thing called a steam engine. All right. So the steam engine, basically, you have a bucket of water, you put fire under it, and you boil the water. But this bucket is fully enclosed. So since, I'm going to throw some science at you, gas takes up more space than liquid, when you boil the water and it evaporates inside this enclosed container, it creates pressure. This has been done. This is how teapots work. This is why they whistle when the water boils, right? Because the steam will shoot out. It literally takes until the late 1700s for people to realize, wait a minute, that's just pressurized air and I didn't have to do anything other than make a fire. What if that pressurized air can be used to like turn wheels and things like that? The steam engine is a game changer. So when the steam engine comes out, people realize you now have a machine that just needs heat, fire, water, and a lot of smart people and a lot of iron to basically get it to do work that human beings used to have to do by hand. Once this comes out, all types of machines come out to start mass producing things, and this time period when this starts happening, a lot of factory work's going to start taking place, and mass producing goods to sell all over the world is referred to as the Industrial Revolution. So technically, this is what leads up to the brand new cell phone that comes out every year, and everybody's like, I want the new cell phone. That's all started with the Industrial Revolution, of wanting the next new thing. In the 1700s, it really got started in England. That is the Industrial Revolution. America is going to jump in there on that first Industrial Revolution. 1870s, which we'll get there in a couple units. That is electricity. That's really going to change stuff. This says 1969, but it was more like the 90s when computers and the internet completely take over and fundamentally change the way we live our lives. Present day, they're talking about us being in the intelligence industrial revolution, in which it's like artificial intelligence and like cars that can drive themselves and things like that. But it all starts with the steam engine. There's another really important invention that comes out at the exact same time the steam engine. Well, it's an American invention, comes out a little after the steam engine. Created by a guy named Eli Whitney. Eli Whitney invents this concept of interchangeable parts. So this seems relatively like a simple concept, but nobody had thought of it or put it in place before Eli Whitney did it and patented it. All right. So what Eli Whitney does is he needs to make a bunch of guns. Well, the problem with making a bunch of guns is it takes a long time. Because to make a gun, you have your gunsmith. You have to sit here and you have to go through and make a gun step by step, all the pieces individually, until you have a gun. It takes a long time, all right? Because you're a skilled gunsmith. Then you sell that gun, all right? Somebody goes out and uses the gun, for whatever, and it ends up breaking. The only way to fix that gun is you have to take it back and find the guy that originally made it, Eli Whitney, and he's got to custom go through and rebuild whatever part of it that broke, because every gun was a unique individual gun handmade by somebody. Eli Whitney, hoping to mass produce guns, comes up with this idea. He's like, well, there's 50 parts on a gun. I can sit down individually, make all 50 parts, put a gun together, and then do it all again. Or if I want to make 1,000 guns, I can make 1,000 of each individual part. But the thing is they all have to be the exact same size so they can all snap together and fit on a gun. Like, you can take one of each parts and snap together and put it on a gun. He does this. And shocker, it works, which is how almost everything is made now. You make all the individual parts and then you put them together. That's a game changer. And it's awesome. Funny story, he had to make a bunch of guns for the government because he said he could make them cheaper, and then he couldn't. While he's coming up with interchangeable parts, he actually loses the contract that he was given in order to make all these guns, because he actually couldn't make them fast enough, because he was like, ooh, he went down the squirrel hole of interchangeable parts. So what ends up happening is, even though he loses the contract, he does invent this concept of interchangeable parts. Now, you have all these different parts, you go snap it together, make a gun. That was his goal when he made interchangeable parts, is that once you have all the pieces, you can make the guns faster, all right? Which will lead to the assembly line, as we'll talk about more here as this course goes on. The unintended thing, and this is the most important part of it, is if that gun breaks, say the trigger breaks, you don't have to go find Eli Whitney if he's the guy that made it to replace it. You just have to find that exact same part, and since all the guns are made the same, there's extra parts laying around, and all the parts from all the different guns of the same make and model will fit in the other guns. It's just like when a car breaks down now, you just go replace that part. That is a new concept because of Eli Whitney mass producing the parts. So it used to be, and let's use a modern reference to this, if this was present day and Eli Whitney had never invented interchangeable parts and your car breaks down, well, your car's just dead. Unless you can find a guy that custom built your car, you just shove it off a cliff and go spend a gazillion dollars to buy a brand new car. Well, that's not what we do today. If a car breaks down, you go to Advanced Auto Parts, you pay $25 for the part, you fix your car. Hooray! You don't have to throw the whole car away. That's what happened with Eli Whitney's interchangeable parts. These machines that need to be used in the factories were huge and very complex. They could cost millions of dollars. Factory owners didn't want to buy that machine because if it broke, they didn't want to be out millions of dollars. With Eli Whitney's concept of interchangeable parts, you can now buy that big machine, and since all the parts are custom fit or mass produced to make that machine, because everybody's buying these machines, if a part breaks on it, you can just fix it for 25 bucks and not millions of dollars. So, because of interchangeable parts, factory owners are much more willing to commit to these really expensive, really large machines they use in their factories because they know if it breaks, they can fix it. That seems like a simple concept, but it really does change the trajectory of American industry after this, because rich people aren't afraid of buying really expensive machines knowing they can fix it because of Eli Whitney's concept of interchangeable parts. So the question here is, explain how the concept of interchangeable parts encourage factory owners to invest in large expensive machinery that help expand the Industrial Revolution. So pause me, answer that completely. We're moving on. So, to kind of combine these two concepts, a manifest destiny of spreading out west with the idea of the Industrial Revolution, there's no better example than old Robert Fulton. So Robert Fulton, he's sitting around one day, all right, this is old drawing of Robert Fulton, and he says, I got myself a steam engine, got myself a boat. So, just like today, everything's cool. You slap the internet on it, it makes it cooler. That makes everything better. That's kind of how the steam engine was back in the 1800s. The steam engine got put on everything, so he's like, hey, what if I take a steam engine and I put it on a boat called a steamboat? So what this will do is it'll power a big wheel paddle thing that will drive the boat forward. Because before this, all right, here's how boats move through water. Either the current took it, you used sails, or you had rows, right? None of those are conducive for really trade. But once Robert Fulton here comes up with this idea that you can put a steam engine on a boat, creates a steamboat, now the fastest way to travel, you can go up and you can go down, as you always have been able to, and up the Mississippi River. That's a big one. You don't have to get your boat out and have oxen drive it, take it up the side of the Mississippi River. You can now drive a boat against the current of the Mississippi River. Drastically expands trade because now the fastest way of traveling around the country, all right, is through steamboat, is by boat. And you can move at a rocketing probably like 8 miles an hour, all right? So when this becomes the best way of travel, they start making these man-made rivers, all right, all through towns. You've probably never seen one like this. This is crazy. So they'd like build streets and fill them with water so that boats can like travel. Now they wouldn't have like whole streets filled with water like that, but to get through towns, you'd make these man-made rivers called canals so you could travel back and forth. This was a huge undertaking. There was a very famous one, and this is still used today. It's called the Erie Canal. So what the Erie Canal, this is in the state of New York. This is still here present day. I'm going to zoom out and show you where this is. But this red line is a man-made canal, still used today. So why would they make a canal specifically in this region? Well, there's a very good reason for that. Not only just to connect everything in New York, if you zoom out, all right, it connects all the Great Lakes. So cities like Chicago, Cleveland, Buffalo, these cities that were landlocked in the middle of the country can now have access to sell stuff to England because you can get all the way out to the Atlantic Ocean over to England. The canals were all the rage. Everybody wanted the canals. Didn't take long for them to realize, wait a minute, there's a better and cheaper way of doing this. Instead of making boats and then roads out of water, what if we just put a steam engine on a wagon? And they're like, well, it'll be way too heavy and it'll sink. And they're like, but we're going to put it on tracks. And the canals were the way everybody traveled for about 10 years. Then, pretty quickly, people realized a better idea is to make trains. All right? Trains, not only can they go faster, they can go 20, 30 miles an hour, but the big benefit to trains is that putting tracks down between cities is a whole lot easier than building canals. So canals become obsolete pretty quick. Everybody commits to railroads. One of the biggest important things with railroads is as railroads become extremely widely accepted at the time, since they went to every single town and canals become obsolete, everybody wants railroads. Thousands and thousands of miles of track of railroad get created almost immediately, as fast as they can, and this became the preferred way of travel. It is crazy fast at the time. Trains can go faster, like horses can run, and they don't have to stop. But it sped up communication too, because every town had a train station. All right, and then any new towns will build at a train tracks to have a train station. Mail post offices is how you communicate with people. Would now be at the train station, and instead of having to pay somebody with a horse to run it out to the next town to get your letter out, there ends up being a national post office, and they're always located at the train stations because that's how mail comes in and out of the train stations. But the question here is, why was there such a quick change in the United States from using canals to railroads as the primary method of transporting goods over long distances? Basically, why did people prefer to have trains versus canals? So pause me, answer that completely. Moving on. So America's going to do something that has never been done in the history of forever, all right? One of the things that we embraced early on is this concept of laissez-faire economics. Means the government doesn't get involved in your business. Do whatever you want. Government doesn't care. As long as you're not murdering people or anything that the government's got to get involved with, we don't care. Hands off. Well, with the factories and the Industrial Revolution, the factory owners started getting rich. Then they started getting really rich. And one of the reasons they started getting really rich is they figured out this concept of a centralized textile factory. Basically, and this is an example of one, instead of having all these little factories make different parts of a product, they all get made at one place. All right, so these centralized textile factories, and they're almost all exclusively in the north, all right, for a variety of reasons. So almost all these factories are exclusively in the north of the United States. Tons of jobs. Factory work's going to skyrocket. And we create these centralized textile factories. They had all types of factory workers. Kids highly sought after for factory work. What ends up happening, and here's the real change and the unique thing, is people started getting rich. Then they started getting, when I say people, the owners, started getting crazy super rich. Here's what's called the market revolution at the time. When people started getting super rich in previous countries, the government either took all their money or shot them, or both, because the government views them as a threat. In America, and this was new, you have a factory and you make $50 million, in any other country you should be worried about that. America's economy and government, high fives, make sure you pay your taxes, good job. You have more money than the government, good on you. The fact that America completely allows people to be wildly, insanely, ridiculously rich in the United States is something that other countries had never done before. We embrace the fact that people can be rich here, and our government doesn't view it as a threat. So the question is, what was different about the American economy than almost any other economy that had ever existed? We just talked about it. Answer that completely. I'll see you guys tomorrow.